Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Alberta government announces that more surgeries are being cancelled to accommodate rising COVID-19 cases. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says help is on the way to provinces dealing with a strong third wave of the virus, including here in Alberta. And Calgary Tory MP Michelle Rempel-Garner blasted the Trudeau Liberals over a bill she says squashes freedom of speech.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Health Services says it will reduce scheduled surgical activity by up to 30% in Calgary, Edmonton, and the North Zones due to rising COVID-19 cases. The province says it will also reduce some non-urgent procedures and ambulatory appointments. Alberta Health Services says the changes will allow hospitals to expand inpatient beds if necessary and create more capacity for COVID-19 cases requiring hospitalization. There are close to 21,000 active cases here in the province of Alberta, the second highest total since the pandemic first began. The government of Alberta updated their COVID-19 numbers on Wednesday. Over the past 24 hours, we've seen an increase of 1,839 cases. There are 643 people in hospital with the virus, along with 145 in intensive care. There have been 2,073 deaths attributed to the novel coronavirus. Fortunately, over 163,000 Albertans have also recovered from the virus. In total, we have 29,938 active cases across the province. There are 7,097 in Calgary, 4,104 in Edmonton. Red Deer has 712 active COVID-19 cases. Here in Lethbridge, we have 411. Lethbridge County has 118. Cypress County has 44. And in Medicine Hat, there are 170 active cases of the novel coronavirus. The first 300,000 doses of Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine have arrived in Canada. This is the same vaccine that was tied to people developing rare blood clots and low platelet counts after being vaccinated. The doses are expected to be distributed to provinces next week. More than 1 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine also arrived this week, and around 650,000 doses of Moderna are en route as well. Doctors across Canada are launching a campaign called This Is Our Shot. It's to encourage racialized communities most at risk of COVID-19 to get vaccinated. The campaign is kicking off with a virtual town hall moderated by Olympian Clara Hughes. The aim is to answer questions about the vaccines in more than 24 languages, such as whether vaccines are vegetarian, which apparently they are. Dozens of healthcare professionals are being sent to help some provinces during the third wave of COVID-19. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says help is on the way to Ontario and Nova Scotia, and discussions are also underway to help Alberta.
Our government is covering the costs of deploying these teams, and we're ready to do the same for any other province or territory that can also step in with support. Unfortunately, Ontario is far from the only place dealing with a spike in cases. Across Nova Scotia, and especially in the Halifax region, numbers have risen quickly, and the province requested help. So we're sending support. We're deploying 60 Canadian Armed Forces members to testing centres in Nova Scotia. This will help stop the spread of the virus. For Albertans, too, we're standing ready. Over the weekend, the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, which includes Fort McMurray, declared a state of emergency. Yesterday, Minister Hajdu talked to Mayor Scott about the outbreak in the region and the situation on the ground.
That leads into this week's poll question on our website. Do you think that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have done a good job during the pandemic? Log on to our website, bridgecitynews.ca, and let us know your thoughts. We'll have the results of our poll coming up on Friday's Newscast. It appears as though many Canadians are taking issue with the federal Liberals' new Bill C-10. Now, that's the bill which would have the Liberals police what is being said or written online. The Liberals believe that this bill would help cut down on fake news, but others, including Calgary Tory MP Michelle Rempel-Garner, says this is a dangerous precedent which would impact our freedom of speech.
His government can decide what you post on social media, and I'm look, this is not an exaggeration. I'm showing an article right here. This is his heritage minister, and the headline is Ottawa's move to regulate video posts on YouTube and social media called an assault on free speech. And this is in mainstream media right now. So the Liberal government, Justin Trudeau, has put forward a bill that it would essentially, not essentially, allow the government to regulate what you say on social media. And this is not an exaggeration. My colleague Pierre Poilievre is out on this today. I don't care how you vote. You have to oppose this. He is doing this in the middle of the pandemic. And like many of you know that the only way that people that oppose Justin Trudeau and his government can get a message through is through social media.
Political reporter Brian Lilly says he wonders if the Liberals would be in favour of Bill C-10, the legislation to squash free speech, if the Conservatives came forward with it.
I doubt the Liberals would like the idea of, if the Conservatives were in power, them deciding what could be said online. If that's your view, then you shouldn't want your party to have the decision of what can and can't be said online. It is being described accurately as an attack on free speech, and the government needs to clean up not just their messaging, but their legislation and where they want to go on this.
Mr. Lilly will also discuss the controversy of COVID-19 vaccine passports and if we can look forward to seeing them soon. That's coming up later in our newscast. Federal Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole pushed back on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who said that no one in his office knew an allegation against Canada's top military officer a few years ago was a Me Too complaint. Trudeau says the complaint was properly handled, but a better system is needed to support those who come forward with allegations.
The Minister of National Defence was aware of sexual misconduct allegations against General Vance in 2018. The Clerk of the Privy Council was aware. The Senior Advisor, Mr. Marquez, to the Prime Minister was aware. The Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister was aware in 2018. Mr. Speaker, was the Prime Minister aware of sexual misconduct allegations in 2018?
What the Leader of the Opposition is putting forward is simply untrue. While there was awareness that there was a complaint against General Vance, there was no awareness that it was, in fact, a Me Too complaint of a sexual nature. These are issues that we have continued to work on seriously as a government.
If you happen to drive by Lethbridge City Hall today, you will have noticed that the flags were flying at half-mast. April 28th is a day of mourning, a special day to honor and remember those workers who were killed, injured, or disabled on the job. Government statistics say 150 Albertans who were lost to workplace injury or illness took place in 2020. The National Day of Mourning was officially recognized by the Canadian government in 1991, 8 years after the Day of Remembrance was launched by the Canadian Labour Congress. The Day of Mourning is now recognized in around 80 countries around the world. A downtown Lethbridge restaurant is facing frustrations that go far beyond the current restrictions the province has implemented. The Telegraph Tap House posted photos on their Facebook page of their patio furniture being stolen. Tracy Rogerson, general manager of the restaurant, says it's frustrating because she has to repeatedly shop for new furniture to replace what's being stolen.
Lethbridge is a fantastic place, and there's not a lot to do here right now with COVID. So this is one of the things you can do is come downtown to the patio and enjoy a beverage or a lunch here. We really appreciate having this space, but we don't appreciate having our items stolen. It's been very hard on us. Every week when I go out and purchase new tables, it's already been a few $100s, and it's a lot more work for us, unfortunately, to have to bring in items every night. Otherwise, they might get stolen.
On the second Saturday of every June, Target Hunger Lethbridge hosts a food drive. Now, their volunteers collect donations from households in our city of the most wanted food items for our local food banks. Volunteers are needed to help out in many areas. Video journalist Naveen Day has the story.
The Target Hunger Organizing Committee is hoping to involve as many people as possible in the initiative of collecting food donations for both the Lethbridge Food Bank and the Interfaith Food Bank Society. Kush Patel, who is a coordination intern with Target Hunger, explains the areas where volunteers are needed.
We're looking for about 250 volunteers, and they're in 3 categories: route volunteers, sorting volunteers, and community champions, or multifamily dwelling volunteers. So basically, route volunteers go out and deliver the yellow Target Hunger bags and pick them up on the second Saturday of June, which is June 12th this year. And we have sorting volunteers who go to the food banks themselves and sort all the volunteer donations that are brought in. And then we have multifamily dwelling volunteers who are responsible for coordinating their apartment buildings, condos, or gated communities to collect food donations from them, as we don't really go into those closed-off community areas.
The initiative usually aims to raise 100,000 pounds of food. This year, they have set a goal of 50,000. Coordination intern Yamin Raza explains why.
This year, we are aiming to raise 50,000 pounds of food. Just with the current situation, it's been harder to get volunteers. We think 50,000 pounds of food will still help us a lot.
The online volunteer sign-up tool on targethungerlethbridge.com opens on May 1st. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
When you think of a mother, words like nurturing, caring, and loving often come to mind. Mother's Day is coming up on May the 8th, and a local group in Lethbridge is making it their goal to ensure moms in our community receive an incredible day. As Micah Quinn explains, care packages will be awarded to deserving mothers who need it the most.
$500 worth of items will be awarded to 3 mothers by the Green and Yellow Group of Lethbridge. Included inside will be flowers, chocolate, perfume, and other gifts to say thank you.
These packages to 2 local mothers here in Southern Alberta. We're looking for a single mother, and we're looking for a mother that their children has already left, that they're home alone. And then we're looking for a grandmother. We're looking at getting massages for them, wine glasses, makeup, perfume.
The care packages are all being donated by local businesses right here in Lethbridge.
We've reached out to Canadian Tire, we've reached out to Save on Foods, we've reached out to other local businesses, to people who do eyelash extensions, makeup, hair, nails, everything, trying to keep it local, trying to help the businesses of Southern Alberta as well.
The group is accepting nominees for mothers until May 5th.
I know all mothers deserve it, but I wish we could spoil them all. We wish as a group we could spoil them all, but we're just grateful we could spoil these 3.
For more information or to nominate a mother, you can visit the Green and Yellow Group Facebook page. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Lethbridge Soccer Association has fallen on hard times during the pandemic, which caused them to miss out on the 2020 outdoor season and a majority of the indoor youth season. Now, this year, the organization is hoping for good news regarding the upcoming outdoor season. Sam Heap, the technical director for the association, says that they've started a raffle to try and pay for program and equipment costs.
It's the second one we've actually done. We did one a few months back, which was very, very popular. Really captured the community spirit. We raised $13,000. The registration costs are paid for by some families. So this one, is exactly the same frame of mind. 50-50, obviously very popular in the country. And again, just to buy bowls, cones, pennies, jerseys, like I say, registrations, anything that is back in house, everything that we raise from it comes straight back to the kids and the players on the pitch.
The raffle with the Soccer Association will run until May the 31st. It's a proud day for the University of Lethbridge Pronghorns Athletics. The school announced Wednesday that they are retiring 2 alumni jerseys of the basketball program. Perry Merkovich from Lethbridge and Shauna Molchak from Cardston shared their excitement with BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly as history was made.
It's one of those feelings, just kind of in awe.
Shauna Molchak is the first female to have her jersey retired by the University of Lethbridge Pronghorns.
To see my jersey up there, maybe some little girl's going to look up there and say, oh, look, I'm one day can have my jersey there.
A record holder in Pronghorns female basketball points and assists, she went on to play professionally overseas and represent Canada, including the 1996 Olympic team.
The university is something I'll never forget, not just the basketball-wise, but the people, the stuff you do, the memories you have when you walk into the gym and think, we hosted nationals there in my second year.
A true pronghorn, that's exactly what we want. Pronghorn athletes. We have one from the north side and one from Cardston.
Perry Merkovich's number will also be lifted into the rafters. His pronghorn career began in 1975, and he remains second on the all-time scoring list.
You don't realize what you have until you lose it. And so for me, that program is a part of my life. It's a part of my soul, really.
For Merkovich, this honor goes beyond basketball.
And I'll never forget it until my last breath.
Pronghorns Athletics is planning on hosting a ceremony to honor the 2 stars, that is pending provincial regulations. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Speaking of Pronghorns hoops, men's basketball coach Jermaine Small, who was hired last March, has yet to host a practice with his entire team. U Sports, the governing body of university sport in Canada, has yet to release any information on return to play for fall sports. Coach Small is optimistic that his team will play and he'll finally get to bring his players together.
Everybody in one place at the same time. It's just been, and just, you know, the face-to-face conversations. Like I love that. That's why I love the job. It's the relationships you build with guys. And, you know, we've added 2 new recruits so far. We're gonna add a few more. And yeah, just to have everybody in one place at the same time with no worries and everyone's healthy and safe and just get ready to compete again. What I do, you know, firmly believe is after this year and we get back to some kind of normalcy, like I think it's going to be a year to remember, and, you know, we'll just be more thankful and appreciate, you know, the opportunities we have more. And I know we're all looking forward to just getting back and competing.
All Pronghorns athletics teams are awaiting approval and details from the Canada West Conference. The Calgary Stampede is partnering with the Calgary Food Bank and Solidarity Kitchen to prepare up to 20,000 meals a week for those in need. The 5-week initiative will include roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables, which can feed up to a family of 6. The Calgary Food Bank says their client base has been growing since the start of the economic downturn, and when the pandemic hit, it made the job of helping others even more complex. The prepared meals will also be delivered to other organizations such as Cups, the Mustard Seed, and the Calgary Drop-In Centre. The government of Saskatchewan has reached an agreement with North Dakota for the state to vaccinate essential workers who are transporting goods across the Canada-U.S. border. Premier Scott Moe says around 2,000 residents will be eligible for the program, including truck drivers and energy workers. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum says the program is important for public health, the economy, and the eventual safe reopening of the border. Manitoba reached a similar deal with the state late last week. Government officials in Ontario say hospitals will be able to transfer patients waiting for a long-term care bed to any nursing home without their consent in an effort to free up space. Health Minister Christine Elliott says the government has issued a new emergency order to allow for such transfers to free up hospital capacity for COVID-19 patients.
Our government continues to use every tool at our disposal to address the challenges facing our hospitals. This includes redeploying staff to where they are needed most, transferring patients to alternate hospital sites in surge situations to maximize system capacity, and ensuring that our hospitals have the resources required to provide care for patients. These have not been easy decisions, but they are necessary ones.
Have you noticed the days are getting longer and so much warmer? And the warming trend we've seen across much of southwestern Alberta will continue. Full weather details are coming right up. Well, I really hope you had a chance to spend some time outside today here in southwestern Alberta. Another beautiful day. And this is what took place earlier today at the Sterling Fish Pond. 1,000 rainbow trout were released and are now calling the pond home. Make sure you grab your fishing rod and reel, head out, maybe even catch some late night dinner tonight. Jeanette Roche is here with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, forget spring. Maybe it feels more like summer so we can actually get out and do some fishing.
Yeah, you're making me feel sorry for those poor fish, Hal, if they're going to be somebody's dinner. But yes, you're right. It certainly does feel more like a summer these days. Still fighting those 60K winds, though. But other than that, looking at 23 as a temperature high for tomorrow on Thursday. Looking at 25 on Friday with a mainly sunny skies there. Sunshine on Saturday as well with a high of 20 degrees. Actually, there is a chance of some showers later on in the day and possibly overnight on Saturday evening. Into Sunday, though, it should clear up. 15 the high for Sunday, mix of sun and cloud. 16 for Monday, and then we're going to see that 30% chance of showers again on a Tuesday with a high of 15 degrees. So other than a little bit of precipitation here and there, we are climbing into those 20s, and it is certainly feeling more like summer. Absolutely. Staying above that average high for this time of year, 15. Average low, 1 degree. 31 was our high temperature. That was our record breaker in 1939 and back in 2005. We had another record on the downside, though. It was minus 11. 6:14 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening, 8:44 p.m. So getting closer and closer to that 9 o'clock hour. As we look to the east, or to the west coast rather, for tomorrow, Victoria, mix of sun and cloud, 19 degrees the high. Going to feel a little bit chillier by the water, about more like 14. 17 14 the high in Vancouver. Edmonton seeing some rain in the morning, should dissipate by noon though. 17 the high, 21 the high for Calgary tomorrow with some 50-kilometer-per-hour winds and a mix of sun and cloud. As we look to the rest of the prairie, Saskatoon's high 11 degrees. Now Saskatoon is still reaching those chilly wind chills in the morning, -6 feeling like. Regina 14 with a mix of sun and cloud, 10 degrees the high tomorrow in Winnipeg. Same thing there. They've got the wind chill in the morning, the UV indexes in the afternoon, so it's just kind of all over the place. 60% chance of drizzle in Toronto tomorrow, 12 degrees the high, 18 in Ottawa with mainly overcast skies, and 16 degrees in Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud. Over on the east coast, we are seeing 19 degrees as a high in Fredericton with a mix of sun and cloud. Halifax, 11 degrees. They could see a bit of fog tomorrow. Same thing here in Charlottetown, a bit of fog earlier in the day. 16 the high, though, clearing up for a beautiful sunny day, and 60% chance of showers in St. John's, Newfoundland. 9 degrees the high, 60-kilometer-per-hour winds and some fog. So they got a little bit of everything there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
The Federal Court of Appeal has upheld Alberta's right to turn off the taps legislation. The decision is a victory for the Alberta government in its battle with BC over the legislation enacted in 2018 at the height of the dispute between the two provinces over the construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. The decision said until Alberta imposes restrictions on exports through action taken pursuant to the Act, a dispute has yet to arise. As it stands right now, the dispute is more theoretical than real. Alberta Energy Minister Sonia Savage was pleased by the court's decision, saying that the UCP government remains committed to standing up for Alberta, including protecting the value of our natural resources. Teck Resources says higher commodity prices helped it record a first quarter profit of $305 million. That compared with a loss of $312 million a year ago, when Teck recorded a $474 million asset impairment charge related to its Fort Hills oil sands operation. The Vancouver-based mining company says prices for copper, zinc, and blended bitumen were all higher than a year ago. That was partially offset by the strong Canadian dollar. Revenue for the quarter was up from $2.38 to $2.55 billion compared to 2020. Retail sales rose 4.8% to $55.1 billion in February as core retail sales notched their first increase in 3 months. Stats Canada says the improvement was led by vehicle sales, parts dealers, and gas stations. The preliminary estimate for March suggests a gain of 2.3%. Shopify says its first quarter net income soared to $1.26 billion US. That is 4 times higher than in the same period a year ago. The e-commerce giant says it benefited from a $1.3 billion unrealized gain on an equity investment in the buy now, pay later company, Affirm. Revenue in the quarter reached almost $990 million. That's a 110% increase from a year ago. Yum Brand's first quarter profit has more than tripled from a year ago. Sales were bolstered by strong performances by its KFC and Pizza Hut brands. The parent company of KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut earned $326 million US for the period ending March 31st. That was up from $83 million a year earlier when results were weighed down due to an impairment charge related to its acquisition of Habit Burger Grill. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 181 points in the day to finish at 19,357. The Dow was down 164 points to 33,820. The S&P 500 was down 3 points to 4183, and the Nasdaq was down 39 points on the day to 14,051. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 71 cents to 63.65 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 5 cents to 2.93 US. Gold was up 9 cents to 17.8176 US an ounce, and silver was even at 26.21 US an ounce. Wheat is at $335 per metric ton. Barley's at $345, canola's at $8.95, and corn is at $398 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 58 cents to $118.95. Feeder cattle were down 33 cents to $133.88, and lean hogs were up $1.48 to $111.28. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 81.19 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Health Services says it will reduce scheduled surgical activity by up to 30% in Calgary, Edmonton, and the North Zones due to rising COVID-19 cases. The province says it will also reduce some non-urgent procedures and ambulatory appointments. Alberta Health Services says the changes will allow hospitals to expand inpatient beds if necessary and create more capacity for COVID-19 cases requiring hospitalization. Alberta currently has around 21,000 active cases of the virus. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says the Trudeau Liberals should cancel international flights into our country from COVID-19 hotspots and not just from India and Pakistan. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have more details for us in just a moment. The European Union says they're looking at opening up to tourists once again, but not just anybody. To talk about this in more detail is Toronto Sun columnist and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly. Brian, they're looking for countries with high vaccination rates, so Canadians may not necessarily be welcome?
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, if you're from the US, if you're from the UK, if you're from Israel, or a whole host of small countries that are not named Canada, then you might be able to get into the European Union this year. Of course, everyone has been trying to tamp down on travel. It's not as if travel is completely banned, and we see that in our own country, but there have been attempts to try and make sure that you can't travel as much as you want because of COVID. Well, the EU says they want tourists back this year. They're hoping that their vaccination program is far enough along that they're doing okay, but they're open to countries that are even further along than the European Union is and saying, come on in. Now, this is going to cause a lot of consternation about something called vaccine passports, which some people are very hesitant about. And I understand if it's a vaccine passport about whether you can go to the movies or whether you can go to a restaurant in your own town. But let me tell you, Hal, you better get used to the idea of a vaccine passport for international travel. They already exist for an awful lot of countries. If you want to go to a lot of places in Africa, if you want to go to a lot of places in Asia, South America, you need to be able to prove that you've had specific vaccinations for diseases that we may not have here. And you have to carry that with you the whole time. Anybody that's been to these countries has dealt with that. Well, now it's going to be for COVID-19 as well. If you haven't had your vaccine, they may say, you know what? We like you very much, but you're not welcome here.
Now, Brian, the United Kingdom has apparently hit her immunity between people who have been vaccinated and those who had COVID-19 and recovered. The U.S. is getting fairly close. Now, with the lower infection rates here and lower vaccination rates, what's really the prognosis here in our country?
Well, as we heard from Dr. Theresa Tam, the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Canada, we might be able to see a loosening of some restrictions come summer if we get about 75% of the population with one dose and 20% with two doses. That's kind of her prognosis. We won't lose all restrictions by then, but we'll be able to start opening back up a bit more. That does not sound, overly optimistic as far as I'm concerned. But here's the thing. We are going to be paying the price potentially on two fronts. One, Canada was never as bad as much of the rest of the developed world when it came to the number of COVID infections. I know that, you may have paid attention to your local media and they made it sound like the sky was falling, but our infection rates were never as high as the US or the UK or even Israel. And these are all countries that did much better than us when it came to vaccinations. So we did better on the front end in terms of not having as many cases, but we're doing badly on the back end because we don't have as many vaccines to dole out. Well, both of those are going to come together and bite us in the butt, as it were, because we're not going to hit that herd immunity. Herd immunity is a combination of infections and vaccinations, and are people safe from this being it's not going to go away, but is it going to be a going concern that can overwhelm the healthcare system? That's going to be an issue for Canada longer than it is for countries that either had A, large-scale vaccinations, or B, large-scale infections. We've got neither. It's actually the worst of both worlds for getting out of this.
Now, each week we hear about how our country is receiving so many doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. This week, almost 2 million, but then provinces don't deliver that many doses in a week. Why is that?
That's because of how the vaccines are received and then delivered. So, if you remember back to February, Pfizer, seemed to be an awful vaccine partner because they cut us down to 0 at one point. And then I think they had said it'll be about 20 to 50% reduction in doses. Well, we went to 0, then we went to 20%, and other countries were getting more. And we're thinking these guys are horrible. They've since become the most reliable partner for Canada when it comes to delivering vaccines. And they tend to arrive on Monday and Tuesday of each week, and they are sent directly to where they're going to be used. So if they're going to be used where you are in Lethbridge, they're delivered to Lethbridge. If they're going to be used where I am in Toronto, they're delivered to Toronto. The other vaccines, we're talking Moderna, AstraZeneca, and now Johnson & Johnson, well, those are delivered to the federal government. The federal government has generally taken about 5 to 7 days to then turn around and parcel them out and send them off to the provinces. So we get this, we're going to get almost 2 million doses. Well, about half of that, about the 900,000 roughly, are the doses that the federal government gets. It takes them about a week to get them out to the provinces. So this week is actually very slim for the provinces. Let's put it that way. The numbers won't be as high regardless of which province you live in because they're pretty much dealing with Pfizer. Even if they get the Johnson & Johnson or the Moderna by Friday or Saturday, they've still then got to turn around and send it out to all the locations that it will be used. So those doses will not be going into arms until sometime next week, and that's at the earliest. So next week is going to be very good. As of next week, we start getting 2 million doses a week of Pfizer. As I said, those go directly into the communities they're going to be used in. That's going to speed things up, get us closer to that normal type of life that we all want to get back to.
We've talked often about concerns that people have regarding low platelet counts and blood clots with the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But now, Brian, we're hearing reports about a 54-year-old woman from Quebec dying in connection with the COVID-19 vaccine. Many are wondering, should they even bother getting this vaccine?
Well, at this point, as we're talking now, we don't know if it was directly related to getting this vaccine. That's still up in the air. The Montreal University Health Network, which is the hospital that this happened in, has said that yes, the woman had received it. We don't know about her underlying conditions. I have not received the vaccine shot yet. I've tried, but I think that it's still less than 1 in a million, which is a better survival rate than COVID, but there is a risk. And I think that it's incumbent upon health professionals to explain that risk and go through the risk assessment with you. And if you've got certain conditions, maybe the vaccine's not for you. Quebec health officials still say that despite this risk, which is lower than, by the way, the risk of pregnancy, using the birth control pill, or just living day-to-day life for women, women are more prone to blood clots than men, that the risk is still lower and therefore still worth it. So health officials are still saying it's worth it. I think it's going, it should be up to you and your doctor talking it over, looking at your conditions. And if you have any conditions where blood clots, low platelet counts, any of those are a possibility, you should be discussing that with your doctor and maybe trying to wait until you get one of these other vaccines. As I said, 2 million doses of Pfizer showing up in the country next week.
Yeah, be well informed, absolutely, Brian. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is telling the Liberals that we need to stop travel from some of the COVID hotspots and not just India and Pakistan. Now, Brian, a serious number of COVID positive people were still coming into Canada, pushing up our numbers.
Yeah, and we're talking about more than 3,000 cases over the last 2 months that tested positive on day one. That's numbers from the Public Health Agency of Canada that I received when I was writing on that this week. So that works out to about 2% of the passengers that they tested. Strangely, they're not testing all passengers upon arrival, and I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that. But 2% showing up is something that is of concern. I had the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Ontario, Dr. David Williams, and the Associate Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Barbara Yaffe, both tell me that they're concerned because Pearson is right at our door here in Toronto. It's just next door in Mississauga. It is the busiest international airport, and before we stopped the flights from India and Pakistan, that was 50% of all the tests that were showing up positive over the past couple of weeks. The United States is second to India. Pakistan, I'm not sure why they kept them in there. I think they just started to see an uptick in numbers and decided to include them both. But the United States is the second highest source of COVID positive flights coming into Canada. And some epidemiologists say the numbers could be even higher. So what's the answer? Do we shut down all flights? Do we shut down flights from hotspots? Some of the experts that I've talked to, Hal, say by the time you start shutting down flights from hotspots, it's too late. The variant's in the country. We saw that with the variant from India, the B1617. That's already in our country. Both Ontario and BC knew about it weeks ago. BC months ago didn't let the public know. The UK variant that showed up in December, that was in the country before we shut down flights. So we should be looking at better testing and better quarantine. Like I think I told you last week, there are people who are going into their homes to quarantine, and there will be 10, 12, 15 people in a house. There are stories in the Toronto media about students living like this. There are stories about multi-generational families living like this. And eventually, the whole house gets COVID. And suddenly you go from one person who came off a flight to a dozen or more contracting this virus. Somebody's going to end up in the hospital.
Brian, earlier this week, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said when allegations of sexual misconduct arose against former Chief of Defence Staff General Jonathan Vance in 2018, he didn't know much about it. Yet, as Aaron O'Toole pointed out, Trudeau's own staff used the term sexual harassment in emails. How could he have not known?
That really is becoming the question, Hal, because look, when we first found out the allegations against General Jonathan Vance, they seemed very slight. We didn't know much about them, and it's still shrouded in a bit of secrecy. But we're learning more and more by the day of an ongoing relationship with a subordinate officer that definitely would have violated the rules. We learned that when he was first appointed, the Conservatives heard vague allegations. In the Harper PMO tasked the National Security Advisor to investigate. They couldn't find anything and said, okay, well, we're going to go ahead, even though they'd quizzed Vance about it. 2018 comes around, allegations are forwarded on to the Privy Council office, they're sent to the Defense Minister's office. Inside Trudeau's own PMO, they're discussing using the word sexual harassment. And yet Trudeau says, we didn't know. He said in the House of Commons, we didn't know it was a Me Too type allegation. Well, his staff knew. Senior advisors knew, to both him and to Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan. If you knew that someone was facing allegations of sexual harassment, would you extend their contract and give them a raise without first asking for an investigation? And that's at the heart of this. You know, in the end, I don't know where the allegations against General Jonathan Vance will go. But I will say that you should not be giving someone a contract extension and a raise when someone has come forward and said, there's allegations of sexual harassment. That should give you pause when you say you run a feminist government. That should give you pause to say, we need to look into this.
There is word that the federal government is looking to police the internet. Now, that is the claim over some changes proposed to internet regulations by the Trudeau Liberals. Brian, what do we know so far?
Well, you know, it's gone from talking about needing to make sure that hateful speech is not online to hurtful speech is not online. There's a world of difference between hateful and hurtful. And now we're talking about the government going in to regulate what you post as an individual user on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or any of these other social media channels. There's talk of them, well, not just talk, they have voted and said that they want to do this in regulating apps. That content that goes against what is deemed appropriate needs to be taken down within 24 hours. If this was kept to what had previously been agreed to, you know, supporting terrorism, harming children, libelous actions, then I don't think there would be an awful lot of angst about this. But there are a lot of people on the left and the right who are now saying, wait a minute, you are going to be in charge? You, the government, is going to decide what I can and can't say? That is something that we should all be concerned about. That's not a partisan issue. You know, I doubt the Liberals would like the idea of, if the Conservatives were in power, them deciding what could be said online. If that's your view, then you shouldn't want your party to have the decision of what can and can't be said online. It is being described accurately as an attack on free speech, and the government needs to clean up not just their messaging, but their legislation and where they want to go on this.
You know, Brian, a lot of people would argue that a lot of our freedoms have already been taken away with the lockdowns and restrictions, so why not free speech as well, right? Toronto Sun columnist and political reporter Brian Lilly, thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Fear, it's everywhere in our society. We tend to fear things like losing our job. We fear failure, what the future may hold. And of course, a lot of people fear getting sick and dying, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining us now to talk about how to overcome our fears is Pastor Kelly Stickle, the lead pastor of My Victory Churches in Lethbridge and Southern Alberta. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Pastor Kelly.
Thanks for having me, Hal. It's great to be here.
You bet. I'm not sure we've ever seen this kind and this level of fear before in our lifetime, especially in my lifetime. Now, some fears can be justified, but do you think a lot of the fears we have are somewhat irrational or even unjustified?
Yeah, I would say that probably the majority of the fear that we have as human beings is unjustified. We have this magical way of having our brains just drift off into what ifs and the unknowns, and a lot of those things we will conjure up, and the more we focus on them and pander to those what ifs, those imaginations, the worse it gets. And I think just human nature for all of us is that we do battle fear, and the majority of those fears would definitely be irrational.
Now, Pastor Kelly, some people might argue, listen, I'm not afraid, I'm just a little concerned here. So in your opinion, what's the difference between fear and simply being concerned about something?
Yeah, I think when, again, concern is healthy, and fear, there's a healthy part of fear that is, we want to be cautious, and it's a protective mechanism for all of us. So having concern is good. But I think when you dwell on concern and probably put your focus there and your weight on concern, it easily drifts into irrational fear, and we go beyond just being cautious to being imprisoned by and locked down by fear. And I think when it crosses over into fear with concern, you should still be able to move ahead. But fear is going to actually cause you to pause and to either fight or flight or freeze. And I think it's important for us. We don't want to get into a place where we just stop and we don't move ahead and we don't progress. And that's when it becomes, I think, dangerous fear.
You know, you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes people are so afraid, so fearful that they just stay where they are. They don't move. They don't progress or move forward, like you said. Now, there are differing views on how to respond to the COVID-19 situation. Now, but whatever an individual's opinion may be on wearing masks or getting vaccinated, what advice do you have for those who are living in a constant state of fear?
Well, I'm not going to take sides on masks or no masks or any of that. But when it comes to dealing with fear is unhealthy. In my opinion, it's a deadly virus in and of itself. And I say that because it continually grows. It doesn't seem to go away. It dwells unless you intentionally address it and move beyond that. But in order to move beyond fear, I think one of the biggest things that we need to be able to do is as a Christian, we should put our trust in God. And a lot of times our fear is based on the unknown or the uncertainty. And that's certainly what's going on now, is the uncertainty of the virus, the uncertainty of the economy, the uncertainty of school and protection, and all the crazy stuff that's going on right now creates this uncertainty, and uncertainty feeds fear. But ultimately, as Christians, our trust needs to be in God. And there's a lot of what ifs we can't answer right now, a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainties. But ultimately, God has not left the throne. God has nothing's outside of his control. And ultimately, to overcome our fear, it's looking to him and saying, okay, I trust you, and that you are still in control.
Do we tend to believe our circumstances more than believing in what God has truly promised for our lives?
Absolutely. Our I think just human nature for all of us, that we will focus on our circumstance, because our circumstance, let's just be real. That's what's tangible right in front of us. That's what we see, touch, sense. And that's, right there. And so because it's so prevalent in our lives and so right there, when you're going through a disease, you feel the pain. Well, that's a circumstance. You feel that. So to say, I'm feeling pain, can I still have faith in God? Yes, but you actually have to take your mind and saying, I'm going to look beyond what I see, feel, sense, and I've got to still trust that and lean on God and trust Him.
So, Pastor Kelly, why do you think so many people fear death? And how can we get to the point of faith that we trust God so much that we actually are okay with the prospect of dying?
Well, as believers, I mean, Paul addressed this multiple times in the Bible, and he was addressing a church that was facing threats of death every single day just for being believers. And so it's a very real fear. And I think the reason why we fear death is because it's the great unknown. It's we just don't know, and certainly our minds can play tricks on us because we don't know. We've never been there. What's going to happen, and how's it going to happen? And we all have our speculations. But what Paul said, to the believers, and what the writer of Hebrews said as well, is that especially the writer of Hebrews said that this hope is an anchor for our soul. The hope that he was referring to is the resurrection of Jesus, and the fact that because of the resurrection of Jesus, that means that there is eternal life for us. And a lot of times, the death and the fear of death, we have to go past the unknowns to get to what we do know. Well, Jesus did, as believers, we believe Jesus did rise again from the dead. And because of that, it's not there's different definitions of hope. And hope can be wishful thinking, or hope can be absolute certainty. And when we lean into the resurrection of Jesus, we have absolute certainty that our eternities are sealed, and we need to sometimes place our mind there and go, no, that I know where I'm going. Amen. When I die, and that erases that fear.
So what are the consequences of living in fear, and how does this impact the way we live our daily lives, outside of maybe getting an ulcer, having to deal with that, and having to deal with high blood pressure?
Well, funny story that you bring up high blood pressure, because I'll just be a little bit vulnerable here. I came to we talked about fear being irrational, and I had, for the longest time, my mom about 12 years ago passed away from a battle with cancer. And when you watch someone so close to you die, cancer is a terrible disease. It's a merciless disease, and it's tragic to someone to pass away from, but what it does to the body and all the rest of it. Well, that I didn't realize, after mourning her, I didn't realize that it created this fear inside of me of cancer and of that. And so I had this fear of doctors. And a couple of years ago, I went to the doctor, and the doctor says to me, he says, you've got crazy high blood pressure, and alarmingly so. We're gonna have to get you on medication like right away. And he sent me home with this blood pressure machine. I was like, man, I felt healthy. I've work out all the time. I eat properly. Like, I was like, what is the problem? And it's funny, I took the blood pressure machine home and plugged it in, and my blood pressure was be like at the very healthiest level that it possibly could be all throughout the week. And so I brought her back into the doctor, and the doctor, he's like, you know what the problem is? He said, Kelly, he says, this machine, he says, the problem is you're afraid of me. And I went, what? And he said, when you walked into here, your heart rate ran up, your blood pressure, to the place where it increased your blood pressure to an unhealthy level. And I was like, what are you talking about? And it kind of hit me right in the face. And I walked out, I was like, why am I afraid? Well, I was afraid of going to the doctor, talk about irrational fear. I was afraid of going to the doctor because of him diagnosing and saying, well, you have cancer. Well, the funny thing is the doctor is not the enemy. He's not the one that gives you the cancer. He's the one that actually is going to, if you do have cancer, he's the one that you need to help you kind of walk through the whole process and to save you from all that thing. But this irrational fear came into my heart that it does affect your health. It affects your mind. It affects your relationships. It affects your ability to move forward. Your greatest potential is going to be held back because you can get trapped in fear. And so fear is deadly. I think it's the great captivator, and I'm really quite concerned. Interesting choice of words, I think, but I'm really quite concerned because in our society, I think fear is so prevalent today, more so that it's creating craziness in our world, irrational behavior, irrational conversations, tensions like we've never seen before, and it's just we look and go, the world's going crazy, and I think the root of that is fear.
You know what I've noticed as well, Pastor Kelly, that even kids are becoming more fearful of the future. You know, many are believing the mainstream media playing a lot into people's fears. Will my grandparents die from the coronavirus? Will the world end because of climate change? Any thoughts on how to instill hope and faith in our younger generation?
It's funny you'd ask that. I just heard today that they just did a survey in the US, and they discovered that the people that are most vulnerable and should be the most afraid of the virus are the ones that are least afraid. And in fact, the study showed that the older you are, the more resilient you are, and the less fearful you are in these circumstances. And that really, this virus and the lockdowns and the media and all the rest of feeding a lot of fear into our young people. And I think that's dangerous. And they said one of the things, and they're pressing into why the older generation is less fearful than the younger generation. What's the tension here? But I think as we age, we go through things and going, I made it through that. I survived that. This is not going to be a problem. I've made it through this trial. I can do that. And so sometimes we can have, just through the act of courage and going through a process, we will learn and we become more bold and saying, yeah, I can survive that. I can survive this. And I think for young people, a lot of it is, the fear is just lack of experience or just naiveness as to, is this big, and realizing, I think you realize, like I realize, that, the media is getting paid by fear. They get more hits if they can create more sensational headlines and more fear. That companies will actually sell and make more money based on fear. They'll drive this fear of you not having that, and they know that it makes money, so fear sells. And because of that, our whole society is so adept to fear that we don't even realize it's fear anymore that's motivating us.
Do you think it's really important to make a list of things we're thankful for to take the focus off of fear and maybe more onto appreciation?
Yeah, again, it becomes what you focus on. So if you focus on what you don't have, you're going to be susceptible to fear. If you focus on missing out, you're going to be susceptible to fear. So Paul said it in Philippians, right? He says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition. So he said, okay, present every situation to God and saying, okay, I trust you. That's number one. But then he says, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And it's so important that he said with thanksgiving, because why is that? Well, thanksgiving shifts your focus to what I do have, the strength I have, the things that are good, the things that I'm thankful for. And that shift of focus, I think, gives us the courage to be able to move ahead.
Some recent stats we dug up from Statistics Canada also talks about the fact that less and less couples are getting married these days. Apparently, one of the main reasons given was the fear of getting divorced. Your thoughts?
Yeah, again, it's what you focus on. So we have this what if scenario in our head all the time and going, well, what if it doesn't work out? Well, that's a crazy thing. Like, what if it does? Like, what you're missing out if you don't move ahead. So, like, you're afraid of missing out, so you don't move at all. And that's how fear works. It's just completely irrational. And I think the fear of commitment, and a lot of that is driven by, and a lot of our fears are driven by past pains. So these young people who have seen a divorce or lived through a divorce as a child, saying, I don't want that, and that past pain is now feeding this fear ahead, instead of saying, hey, I saw that mistake, I can learn from that mistake, and I saw what didn't work, and I'm going to apply this so that it will work, is, again, what you focus on, you're going to give power to.
So, Pastor Kelly, any final advice for viewers who are struggling with fear today?
Yes, absolutely. I think the greatest advice that we can do, this is what's worked for me, and this is actually my whole story about going to the doctor. This is kind of how I got myself out of that fear. Is a lot of times fear is fed by the what ifs. So what if I get cancer? And so my advice to people is, identify the what ifs and replace it with God is. So what if I get cancer? Well, God is my healer. Well, what if I lose my job? Well, God is my provider. Well, what if? And whatever the what if is, the Bible has the answer. And again, it shifts my focus, but it puts my trust in God. So I'd encourage everybody that if you're battling with fear, and let's just be honest, all of us do. This is not something that's anyone's exempt from. But when we battle with fear, just replace your what if with God is.
I love that. He's our comforter and our provider. Kelly Stickle, the lead pastor of My Victory Churches in Lethbridge and Southern Alberta, thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much, Hal. This has been great.
You too. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.